It's huge news today. There's been so much off-season conjecture about Dylan Brown and his future, and the news is that he's leaving Parramatta at season's end.
Yeah, Brace, massive news today. Dylan Brown, 10-year deal worth $13 to $14 million to join the Newcastle Knights. Turned down the option in his favour at the Parramatta Eels, which, to be fair, is quite a lucrative deal in itself. It's worth around $1.1 million if he stayed at Parramatta, but instead he's packing his bags at the end of the season and heading to Newcastle. And to be honest with you, we would have been more surprised if he turned down that offer. That is the largest, most lucrative contract in the history of the game. It's huge, and good luck to Dylan Brown. It's a massive signing for the Newcastle Knights.
Nathan, when the news broke late today, your initial reaction?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I think a 10-year deal with that sort of money, it's just, haven't really seen anything like that since Tamalolo signed his 10-year deal. But, as Michael was saying, I think it's pretty hard to turn down a deal like that. It sets him and his future family up for life, really. So, it's no surprise.
I think the first thing I'm asking, if I'm a Newcastle fan, is the people who made the decision to sign him for 10 years, are they going to be there in 10 years' time? Because if this doesn't work, if this fails, who's to pay? Who has to answer the question? I mean, this game is such a tough game. It's so physical. These days, with all the head knocks, the injuries, things can go wrong pretty quickly. In 2 or 3 years' time, if all of a sudden he cops a string of head knocks and he can't play and can't fulfil his contract, the club now have to pay the contract. It's not insured anymore. There's no insurance in the CBA agreement, so they now have to pay his contract out, whether that comes out of the salary cap or out of their bottom line somewhere. It has to be paid. Now, I hope it works out for him. I hope he goes out there and kills them. I hope they win a comp or two and everything works out okay. But I just think it's a little bit irresponsible to sign someone to a 10-year deal. The money, I'm all for players earning as much money as they can. So well done, Dylan, on the deal. I think it's a fantastic deal for yourself. But I just think it's a little bit irresponsible by certain people at the club. And I hope whoever made the decision is still there in 10 years' time.
Gus, I know you'd happily double the money and probably the length to sign this guy sitting next to us tonight on set.
Yeah, what's he worth?
Well, that's another of the questions to be asked as well off the back of this. But what do you make of it? Is it bad business if you're a Knights fan?
Well, first of all, just let me say, for those that want to criticise the money or criticise the player that they've signed, what have you, this is not Dylan Brown's doing. This is his manager, and it's the game, and it's the people who negotiate the contracts at Newcastle. Don't blame Dylan Brown for taking a great offer like this, and I'm all for players earning as much as they can. But so far as the game itself, I've long held the belief that our playmakers are very underpaid, and probably other positions are overpaid. Dylan Brown is 24 years of age. I've said repeatedly that I think the career of the NRL playmaker now is between 25 and 35 years of age. That's when they're matured. They actually know their game and they know what they're looking for. And our senior playmakers are amongst the best in the competition and the best in history right at the moment. So they're buying him for the prime part of his career, all right? Is he the player that's going to change the Newcastle Knights' fortune? Is he a game manager? Is he a kicker? No, he's not any of those things. So obviously they've seen something in him that they need. But a lot of it too comes out of the desperation of our game. We've got so few playmakers available. It's been proven that you need representative class playmakers to challenge for premierships in this competition. That's just a given. And we don't have enough for every team in the competition. There's only a handful of them that can get the job done. Dylan Brown is seen as the next wave. We've got 3 or 4 really senior playmakers that are about to retire in the next couple of years. And we keep looking at what's coming underneath that. And Dylan Brown is probably one of the more explosive young ball runners in the competition. And I can see why they've taken the gamble. I'm not that worried about the money, and I'm not that worried about the 10 years either, because I think they're getting him in the prime of his career. Is he the right player at the moment? There are things he's got to do to his game to get to that position, I think, at this stage.
Gus,
he's still young enough to do it.
What's it do to the rest of the market from your point? I don't have an issue with him earning that money either. Yeah. I think it's fantastic and that he gets to earn that sort of money. But all of a sudden, the next halfback comes along at Parramatta. He might be a young kid, 20 years of age, maybe played a game or two at first grade, might be on 200,000 or 300,000. Next thing his manager's walking in saying, well, hang on, he's about to take his spot. He's got 1.3. Yep. I want 800 or 900 for him when he might be worth 4 or 5. Yep. How's that going to affect the
I think I made this comment years ago when Fafita moved from Broncos to Gold Coast. Remember that? And I said it was an irresponsible deal at the time, over $1 million for a back row forward. I'm not so critical of this one because playmakers, I think, are underpaid in general. I think the value of the playmaker in your salary cap is a lot more than what we pay them. And I think in some other positions are way overpaid.
But do you think it will inflate? Do you think it will inflate the next crop coming
through? But that's the nature of it. That's what it is.
I sort of think.
I think our young playmakers, it's going to put a lot of scrutiny on them. And I won't embarrass Nathan with this, but You've got to be very careful with the young ones, not paying them too much too early and putting too much scrutiny on and too much pressure on, because we've seen that fail in a number of occasions. We've seen young players that couldn't deal with the pressure and couldn't deal with the scrutiny of media and everything that goes along with big pay packages. You've got to manage them through that process and hope they're sensible enough to see it too, because really, their first grade career really doesn't start till they're 25.
Do you think
If they're going to be greats.
Do you think from a Newcastle perspective, Gus, it's a bit of a panic buy? Because there's been a number of things they've missed out in the last 6 months. They've obviously brought Peter O'Sullivan in to do recruitment. They've missed out on Jonah Pezzett, Hazelton. They lost Leo Thompson, young fella heading up to the Dolphins, Seb Sewer. It feels like they needed a win. And to get that win, and not only just for the club, but also to show Kalen Ponga that they're building towards something, because we're all hearing the whispers about where does Kalen Ponga end up, are the Roosters circling? That noise isn't going away. So they're trying to build a roster to convince Kalen that he's worth staying at. But in the meantime, the pursuit of short-term success or that need for a kill isn't going to leave them in a vulnerable situation long-term.
That's the juggling act that you do when you're managing a roster. Now, you've talked about players that they've missed out on, players that they offered money to. I guess their thinking now is if we've got a Dylan Brown, that's an attraction for people to come and play. And I put this down on the Bulldogs. If the Bulldogs hadn't assigned Matt Burton when they did, there's no Cameron Ciraldo, there's no Viliami Kickout, there's no Steve Crichton, there's no sort of those ilk of players coming along, because they can actually see that there's a marquee player that's taken his career choice to go to that club. I think it's really important for Newcastle going forward. If Dylan Brown can be a success, if he can be the player that they want, that's going to help them retain players and it's going to help them get players. It's also going to help the development of younger players coming through the system. You know what I'm like with development. That's the making of your club. That's the DNA of your club. And even to retain players, you need living, breathing examples of professional football. I don't know Dylan. I've never met Dylan as a person. I can only assume that they've done their due diligence and he's the sort of player that they need. And maybe in time, when all these older halves retire, all right, and we've got the new sort of crop leading the way, he's an attraction for the Newcastle Knights to sign those other players that they want.
Nathan, I want to follow up on a few of these issues that have been raised with you. Dylan Brown as the player, what do you see in him that can help justify the pressure that now is going to come on his shoulders once he puts on a Knights jersey next year?
Yeah, well, I think there's been a lot of talk about him being a 6 rather than a 7, and he's obviously been signed up to Newcastle as a 7. But one thing about his game that I really like is how square he plays. And I think that'll just open up so much room for Kalen out the back, and I think him and Kalen could really form a dynamic duo and a really dangerous duo to come up against. And as Gus is talking about, actually helps then back rowers and centres and wingers want to play at their club because they're getting all this space and time to go into holes and all that sort of stuff as well.
I don't want to go too long on this. Last year's grand final, the two best teams by a long, long way. You've got the Melbourne Storm that play with 3 fullbacks and a hooker. And you and Jerome ran for more metres in that game than any game all season, all right? Is the role of the playmaker in big games more about the running than the actual passing and playmaking these days?
Yeah, I think that has to be your first line of thought, especially in big games. You know, you sort of lose half the team in those sort of back and forward games because everyone's just so tired and fatigued. So then the runs become much more explosive. You're going up against tired forwards, so the fast guys, the smaller guys start to come into the game. And I think running has to be at
which
the
he's
forefront of
dynamic.
mind. Yeah, for sure.
He's dynamic.
Well, him and Ponga both. They're both very strong. They're both fast. So yeah, I think.
What worries me about the Knights is they've got so much of their salary cap tied up amongst them 2 players. You still need to lay a platform. Now, they've got Saifidi on big money, Best on big money. We talk about trying to attract talent. How much can they pay that talent? Are they almost robbing Peter to pay Paul?
They might have to develop it.
Yeah,
they're going to have to develop
they've got a decent nursery up there, yeah.
They've got to have to develop. Well, everyone should have to develop their talent. That's the DNA of your club. That's where it's eventually going to come from. But to have living and breathing examples of marquee players up there in the top, that helps. That helps you keep players. It helps you attract the other players that you might need, that you can't fill through your junior nursery system. Every now and then you're going to have to get out and buy a player.
You know the salary cap better than anyone. Would you have that much money tied up in 2 players?
If they were the right 2 players, yeah.
But Penrith are going through at the moment. Like, if you talk about Parramatta on the flip side, what it's going to mean, Mitchell Moses has just been upgraded significantly to be the main man. You're going through it a little bit now at the moment. You lose Jerome Luai, then you're able to reshape your roster and invest in other positions, right? How have you found that change? Because last year, almost $2 million in the salary cap, if not more, in your halves.
Yeah, I think when it first started happening, it was difficult. It's like, you grow up with these guys and you just want to stay together forever, but it's just not the business of the game. And you start to realise that it gives other people new opportunities. They bring in new energy, new blood. I think we are really lucky at Penrith with the junior nursery that we have. We've constantly got young guys knocking down the door, and when they come into first grade, they're ready to be first graders, and I think that's really important. But then it also, like this year is sort of the first time we've actually been able to go to Isaiah Papali'i and Blades Talangi and bring them in, and that sort of makes it exciting too. And I think they're sort of guys that want to come to a club and improve and test themselves. And it is difficult losing your best mates, but then you just make new ones and you create memories with them too.
How far along the track until you believe there could be a $2 million player in the NRL?
I think Gus is the right person to answer that. I don't know.
Well, he wants to give you 2.5 if you're at auction, so...
That'd be nice.
Depends on what time.
You got that much in the cap. You got that much left.
Hey?
You got that much in the cap left.
I'll find it, baby.
Do you feel, Gus, with 3 years to go on this broadcast deal, hypothetically the next one's 5 years, that somewhere in that window?
Well, that's the issue around what the next broadcast deal is going to look like and what salary cap's going to look like. I mean, a 10-year commitment, this goes well beyond the next broadcast rights deal. I don't know. I can't tell you the future of media. I can't tell you the future of broadcast deals. The NRL's doing really well commercially. I doubt the salary cap will ever come down, but, you know, everything has a limit at some stage. I don't think we're just going to keep storing up the way we've been storing up.
I don't think.
And I think honestly, the game needs to be a bit more flexible in the corporate dollars that these fellas attract as well. Like, we don't want everything they're earning in the salary cap and taking money away from their mates and money away from the team growing. That's the hard part of building a team over a period of time, is that if they have success, the salary cap punishes it, all right? And then the senior players feel guilty because they're earning what they need to earn, but they could earn that corporately. They could go out and get that sponsorship-wise if the club knew or had the scope to be able to do that. So I think we need to be more flexible like that.